looking at the NSE 20, ending the first quarter of the year on a positive note. What are your expectations for the second quarter?
I think from the beginning of the year, we've been of the opinion that the market will trade pretty much flat throughout the year. And actually, if you were to look at the charts, for example, for the last, if you look at probably a monthly chart of the index, it's been pretty much flat, which actually shows uncertainty in the market. It's usually an indication of uncertainty in the market in the way that what we might go either way, especially with the political risk being really high in this year. But if you look at specific counters, I heard you, for example, mention KCB, which is pretty exciting. The resistance level for quite a while has been at 23 shillings. Today, it actually hit that resistance level. Although as what would have it was probably one foreign investor who came in to pick up from the market. That is actually pretty exciting news, because what I think probably we may see tomorrow, it may come off from there. But if it begins to rise again, that would be the time to go in, because once it breaks 23 again, it's probably, we expect it's likely to go up all the way to probably 24 to 25 shillings.
You spoke a bit on uncertainty, but we've got a company, Kenya Airways, coming to market with a rights issue that opened today. There's a lot of interest on that front. We have the World Bank's private sector lending arm, the IFC, saying it will purchase shares worth 2.1 billion in that rights issue. Really looking like there'll be a bit of oversubscription on this rights issue.
KQ is a bit of it's a bit difficult to tell, because what happens with KQ after the rights issue, they'll have about 1.9 billion shares on the exchange, which is a really high number. And what happens with that kind of liquidity is you'll find, especially if the market finds it hard to absorb it, especially if there are not so many foreign investors. Look at the example of Safaricom. It moves cents in a day. Probably the reason we see so much activity on this counter is because of the foreign players on it. With KQ, it being an airline, the airline business is always a bit tricky. So we'll wait and see. But at least if we do get an oversubscription, that'll be good for the share price after the rights issue. But I think most of the market is of the opinion that it will come off further.
Looking at some of the offers to come through this week, the central bank will offer the 182 as well as the 364-day treasury bill, really worth 10 billion shillings. Now, all these three papers will be auctioned on the same day. What kind of demand and yield are you expecting to come through for the different treasury bills?
Of course, we still expect the treasury bills to continue coming off. I think they've actually come off a bit faster than we had projected, because we seem to be nearing levels of about 15%, which we expected to be at these levels around June. So we may see the slowdown in the decline come a bit earlier than expected. Also, you mentioned the inflation numbers earlier. Okay, inflation did come off year on year. Mostly, I think you'd attribute this to the base rate when they're calculating the year to date, the year on year number. But month on month, inflation actually did rise, which I think most of the market may look at this. Most of the market are actually looking at that month on month number, and they may feel that probably rates are not coming off as fast as they thought. Also, of course, as the interbank rates indicate. I mean, they've held at levels of 23% despite a lot of maturities coming into the market. Some players are attributing it to probably skewed liquidity with some banks who are holding the rate up there. But all these factors point to a slowdown in the decline of the prime rates.
Now, looking at the MPC, what other factors are likely to drive their decision on Thursday?
Of course, inflation numbers, as I'd mentioned. Okay, underlying inflation has been coming off. They may look at that and not look at the overall inflation numbers, which usually include food. Also, I think the threat of external shocks is still a big factor that MPC will be looking at, and they'll be looking at the global markets, especially when it comes to energy. So these will play into their numbers. Also, there's the other factor of growth in private sector credit growth. These numbers are actually looking pretty good, and projections that will probably be at about 18% by end of the financial year, from a high of, I think, about it was at almost in December, the growth was almost about 30%. So these are good numbers. Also, broad money supply is still coming off. So these are all factors that the MPC will be looking at, but we most probably expect them to continue holding the rate where it is, because I mean, with every month that goes by, we see the effects filter more through to the market.
Now, looking at the shilling, pretty steady ahead of that meeting. What is your outlook for the currency going forward in the week?
Currency has been range bound. I mean, this is good. I think it's most analysts expected it to start weakening, but it's okay. I'm not sure if it surprised others, but it surprised me that it's held strong so far. But also, you could attribute this to also the liquidity, the tight liquidity we are seeing in the market. It's really providing a lot of support for the shilling, because what we're seeing is a lot of USD positions being unwound, and people are not able to go long on this. So basically, I think the tight liquidity has a lot to do with the support of the shilling.